right, let's just dive right into this explainer. We're looking at World War II, the timeline, the causes, and honestly, the world-altering consequences. After World War I wrapped up in 1918, people genuinely thought, okay, we're never doing that again. But, well, as we know, that peace didn't last very long. So today, we're going to break down exactly how the globe plunged right back into total war and how it literally forged the modern landscape we live in today. Let's get into it.
To keep things clear, we've broken this sprawling history down into 5 chapters. The seeds of conflict, a global war begins, the turning of the tide, the darkest human tragedies, and a transformed modern world.
Starting right off with Section 1, the seeds of conflict, a broken world.
So think about the hangover from World War I. The 1918 Treaty of Versailles essentially stripped Germany of its land and, frankly, its pride. Then fast forward a decade and bam, the Great Depression hits, plunging the entire globe into this severe economic despair. It was exactly this desperate, starving atmosphere that created a dangerous vacuum. And in 1933, Adolf Hitler stepped right into it, using fear and scapegoating to promise a return to German glory. To actually pull off his massive expansion, Germany relied on this terrifyingly effective military strategy called blitzkrieg, which literally translates to lightning war. We're talking about a highly coordinated, super fast assault using tanks and airplanes to just violently overwhelm neighboring territories before they even knew what hit them. And while this was happening, Italy under Mussolini and a rapidly expanding Japan teamed up with Germany to form the Axis powers. Which brings us to Section 2, a global war begins, the eruption. Utilizing that blitzkrieg strategy, Germany absolutely steamrolled through Europe. I mean, they toppled Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and shockingly, France in just a matter of weeks. It was incredibly fast. This left Britain pretty much standing alone against these relentless German bombing campaigns. But spurred on by Winston Churchill's famous promise to never surrender, the British dug in and held their ground. Now, as things escalated, the entire globe practically split into 2 massive camps. You had the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, going head-to-head against the Allied forces, which was mainly Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and very soon, the United States. Speaking of the U.S., while Europe was burning, Japan was rapidly expanding its empire across the Pacific. And then came December 7th, 1941. Japan launches a devastating, complete surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. This was a massive turning point. It instantly dragged the United States into the fray, mobilizing millions of troops and transforming American factories into absolute powerhouses of wartime production.
Moving on to Section 3, the turning of the tide, global expansion.
In 1941, Hitler made what is arguably one of the biggest miscalculations in military history. He broke a non-aggression pact and invaded the Soviet Union. The Eastern Front quickly became an absolute meat grinder. The German military found itself totally crippled by freezing sub-zero Russian winters, completely overextended supply lines, and a fierce, unyielding Soviet defense that ultimately claimed millions and millions of lives. At the exact same time, you've got this incredibly brutal combat raging across the Pacific Ocean. Battles at places like Midway, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa forced soldiers into hellish, hand-to-hand island warfare. These troops weren't just fighting dug-in enemies. They were battling suffocating heat, thick jungles, and volcanic ash. Just absolutely grueling conditions.
Meanwhile, back over in Europe, the tide finally started to turn with literally one of the largest amphibious invasions in human history. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, pushing through a terrifying hail of gunfire. This massive, highly coordinated assault finally cracked Fortress Europe and really kicked off the liberation of the continent from Nazi control.
We need to pause our timeline here for Section 4, the darkest human tragedies, the Holocaust and beyond. It's crucial to understand that behind the battle lines, Hitler's regime was committing unimaginable, horrific atrocities. They systematically rounded up innocent civilians, sending them to concentration and extermination camps. And these victims were targeted purely out of hatred: Jewish people, Romani people, individuals with disabilities, political opponents, and various other minorities.
The sheer scale of this is just devastating to wrap your head around. Around 6 million Jewish people alone were systematically murdered in the Holocaust. It remains one of the absolute darkest tragedies in human history, standing as a permanent, chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and institutionalized hatred. And when you zoom out to look at the entire conflict, the total human cost is staggering. We are talking about upwards of 70 million people dead. That includes soldiers on the front lines and civilians who were caught in the crossfire or purposefully targeted by regimes. Entire cities across Europe and Asia were literally reduced to rubble, making this, without a doubt, the deadliest war in human history. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, a transformed modern world, the fall and the future. So, by 1945, Germany was essentially caught in a giant geographic vice. You had Soviet forces aggressively pushing in from the east, and American and British forces squeezing them from the west. This relentless pressure led to the complete collapse of Berlin, the death of Hitler, and finally, Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945, what we call VE Day. But keep in mind, the war over in the Pacific was still very much raging. The U.S. had just developed this terrifying new technology, the atomic bomb. In August 1945, 2 of these bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hundreds of thousands of people perished from the immediate blasts and the immense radiation that followed. Faced with this unprecedented level of destruction, Japan surrendered on August 15th. The war was finally over. And out of the ashes of all that destruction, our modern world was essentially born. To try and prevent anything like this from ever happening again, the United Nations was established. The map of Europe was totally redrawn. Germany was divided up, and the US and the Soviet Union emerged as rival global superpowers, which immediately sparked the Cold War. Plus, weakened European empires opened the door for massive global decolonization. The whole world was just forever changed. So, looking back at a war that started from dictatorship, aggression, and economic despair, and grew into a global fight against tyranny, it really leaves us with a critical question. Knowing that this devastating conflict was fueled by unresolved anger from a previous war, how will we actively apply these dark lessons to safeguard peace and human rights today? What exactly can we do to ensure that unchecked power never plunges the world into darkness again? Thanks for digging into this explainer with me. Keep asking questions and keep learning.